Hi, I'm Adam Wakeman from Ozzy Osbourne's band and Black Sabbath. You're watching Artisan News. Originally, I'd been on tour with Ozzy for about pretty much 18 months, and I loved touring with Ozzy, and I realised I hadn't really seen a lot of my friends for a great deal of time, and thought it would be a good opportunity to get together with some good friends of mine that are also great musicians, and try and put a band together where we can kind of, kill two birds with one stone, really. Be together as pals and have a few drinks and have a laugh, and then also write music, have Headspace as an outlet for us that maybe we wouldn't get with some of the other artists will work with. There's not really any boundaries musically with Headspace. We kind of do what we like, really.
Yeah. So talk about you talk about having no boundaries and having that creative freedom. When you go about creating this, are you looking at it as something that's going to have really no parameters involved?
Yeah, we sort of try not to look at it at all, really. We kind of just do what feels natural, which is sort of why some of the songs end up being 14, 15 minutes long, and some end up being 2 minutes long. I think it's very difficult with music, as you were saying, to make kind of things sound original without sounding like you're just replicating something. So for us, we don't consciously think about it, but we're quite open with our influences. Obviously, Yes, Genesis, kind of then the heavier bands, bit of Dream Theater, Meshuggah. I know Pete's a big Meshuggah fan. And it's kind of, we just kind of try and throw all those in and see what kind of happens, really. I think it's important to sort of be proud of your influences, but just try not to replicate them.
Right. So I did want to follow up and ask you, talking about Yes, what do you remember at your earliest age when you first were aware of what your father did?
Yeah, well, I remember my mum and dad split up when I was about 3, so we used to visit my dad at weekends and when he wasn't on tour, and we'd go and see him doing shows. I mean, I remember the moment where I decided that I wanted to be a musician, which was I was about 8 years old, saw him in one of the incarnations of Yes in a I think it was Wembley Arena, and at the time I was kind of not sure whether I wanted to be a Greenpeace protester or a policeman. It was kind of that period, and then and I saw him and just saw the kind of reaction of the crowd and saw the kind of whole emotion of it, and just thought, I want to do that, and that was it, which is kind of handy, really, because I'm not really very good on boats, so the Greenpeace protester wouldn't really have worked out with Rainbow Warrior, but yeah, that was kind of the first time I knew what I wanted to do. When it comes to sort of realising what he did, I suppose it was kind of normal. That was, what he did was sort of normal to us. That was just, what every dad does, kind of. It wasn't until I was much older that I sort of realised, actually it's pretty cool.
It's one thing for you to get the love and the passion, and it's one thing for your father to have the love and the passion. How much did you get to share that passion together, and what was that relationship like as far as son and musician?
Well, fortunately, I was very lucky because I moved to live with him when I was 16, and we recorded an album together. One was called Wakeman with Wakeman. That was the first album we did. First of, I think we did 8 in total, including some live albums, and we toured for about 2 or 3 weeks, and that then rolled into 2 or 3 months, which rolled into a year, and we pretty much worked together fairly sort of consistently for nearly 10 years. So from when I was 17 till 27, I worked with him most of the time. So we toured. I say very lucky. It was the best apprenticeship course I could have wished for, really. It was great. He was very good. He didn't treat me any differently to the crew. So if I missed the bus call, and then I got oil spotted and had to make my way to the next gig. So it's if I was hungover. He very proudly tells a story of when because obviously he used to be quite a, what's the term? A booze enthusiast, I think, is probably the way to look to say it. He liked to drink, you know, and he was, you know, there's great stories of him over the years, but he was very proud when he stopped drinking that he saw that I was ready to leave at a very early bus call in the morning at 7 o'clock, and in this hotel, and I was just sort of laying down in the lobby, and he was like, "It's great that, you know, you can go out and have a drink, but you can still be here ready, you know, ready to check out." And I said, "Check out? I haven't checked in yet." So I could see a lot of an element of sort of proudness, you know. He was just really sort of, you know, he was like, "Yes, my son's carrying it on," you know.
And here's just my personal opinion. I mean, what the fuck is people thinking, not including Yes? I mean, can you explain it?
I don't know. I mean, they've been pretty. I mean, it must be difficult. I'm going to be devil's advocate, really. There's a lot of people that they could, you know, induct, and a lot of people it took a long time for them to get round to it. So I don't know. Maybe that's on the cards. I don't know. I mean, they don't really. Those guys have never done it for any kind of accolade or awards or inductions into Hall of Fames and things. So. Yeah, personally, yeah, I think they should be in it, and hopefully at some point they will.
You talk about, you know, working with Ozzy. How did that whole relationship come about? How did that happen?
Pretty bizarrely, actually. A lot of people think it's because my dad obviously worked with them briefly with on the Bloody Sabbath album. He played on a couple of tracks on that, Spiral Architect and another track I forget. But it was actually, I was touring with Annie Lennox. I did a year tour with Annie, and we played in somewhere at a theatre in Los Angeles, and in the front row was the normal kind of, you know, LA crowd of actors and actresses and stuff. And, you know, most of the band, we were just kind of seeing who we could recognise, you know, from the telly in the front row, and there was kind of Rod Stewart and his Amazonianly tall girlfriend at the time, and Sharon was there in the audience, Sharon Osbourne. And I said to our tour manager, I'd love to meet Sharon. At the time, the Osbourne's TV show was huge. I said, I'd love to meet her. And he said, oh, it's interesting. He said, because I used to work for Sharon's dad many years ago as a tour manager. And he said, I'll introduce you. So he introduced me, and we chatted for about half an hour. And then kind of about 4 or 5 months later, I was checking my email, and for some reason I checked the junk folder of my email, and in amongst all the advertisements for Viagra and you know, penis enlargement creams, there was, which don't work incidentally, because otherwise you just get massive hands. But I'm losing my mind here. So email, right? So in the email folder was an email from Sharon's office saying, "Could you call this number?" So I called the number expecting it to be some kind of scam thing, and it was Michael at her office who said, "You know, Sharon really enjoyed meeting you, enjoyed the concert. You know, would you be interested in playing keyboards with Ozzy on his next tour?" And as it happened, I was with a band called Travis at the time, and I was already on a tour with them, so I couldn't leave in the middle of the tour. So I turned it down originally, and then he had an accident on a quad bike, so the tour was postponed. This is back in 2003. The tour was postponed for a year while he got better, and when he came to tour again, they called me again and asked if I was available, and fortunately I was. So that was the start back towards the end of 2003, I think. Hi, this is Adam Wakeman. We'll be right back at the diner.
It's Sabbath's last go around.
Sure.
And you have a unique perspective on Ozzy and how he's doing. And I mean, do you think that for him that this will be the last?
I mean, I don't know from one year to the next what's going on. You know, I'm just grateful to be invited back. That's the kind of way I look at it. With Sabbath, I mean, they've said it's the end. It's the end. As you know, as far as everyone's concerned, this is the final tour, and I think it's great as well that they're going out on that kind of high. As for Ozzy, I mean, he's always said that he doesn't want to retire. You know, he wants to keep going, and all the time he's enjoying it, and people are coming to the shows and enjoying it. I don't see why he would stop. And also he's got such a kind of catalogue of solo material that so many albums that people want to hear. So after the Sabbath thing, who knows? Hopefully he'll continue with his band.
Anything brewing as far as recording? Do you have any? Would you be
No,
open? If you offered, would you be open to doing that?
Absolutely, yeah. I was over the moon with the last album, Scream. I got to co-write 6 songs on that with Ozzy and Kevin Churko, a great producer, and I just had such a great experience with him. He's kind of, he's to write with somebody like that is quite an experience. It's quite daunting. I do a lot of writing with other people, but not so much with an artist of his stature. So it's kind of it's a real, it's a real honour to do it. And obviously, yeah, I'd jump at the chance to do it again.
Thanks. So Sabbath have been known to be party animals. Do you think they've slowed down at all in their older age, or are the fairies still wearing boots?
No, they'd be dead if they didn't slow down. I mean, you can't keep up that lifestyle. I mean, it's brilliant. I do feel so fortunate. I've sat, in places like this and just had conversations with them about the old days where, one minute you're sat there with guys in their 60s who are grandparents and they've got children and families and they're talking about dogs and their gardens, and then they suddenly tell you a story about, driving cars into the sea and stuff that you just don't hear anymore, which is, I'm just so honoured to be able to hear those stories from their mouths. It's brilliant.
What's the most interesting thing you think they've told you that,
Probably absolutely none I could tell you on camera. I'll tell you afterwards.
And bringing it back to Headspace, favorite track, Road to Supremacy. How did that one come about? How did that?
Well, with Headspace, it's quite interesting with how the writing kind of starts, because we're never in the same place at the same time. With Ozzy and Sabbath's schedule, Pete and Adam Faulkner, the drummer, they both work with Dido and other bands, so they're kind of all over the place. Damien obviously is working, he's busy with, he does this Maiden United project, and he's got, and Threshold he tours with as well. So, and Lee Pomeroy is probably the busiest man, in the world when it comes to playing bass. He's with so many different bands at the moment touring. So it tends to start with myself and Pete with writing the kind of, a lot of the music, and then we send it to Damien, who writes the top line and the lyrics and stuff. So that was actually one of the first tunes we kind of put together, and as the album was kind of finding its feet really. So and it was kind of, we wanted it to feel like the introduction to the album, which I think it kind of does.
Yeah. And Polluted Alcohol, how did that one, what was that, what inspired that?
Well, that was weird, because that's not really, the sort of thing that Headspace is kind of known for, really. That's, Damien had an idea for a kind of Midwest, kind of Americana kind of sounding track, and Pete came up with that slide guitar part. When Damien heard it, he was like, "Oh, that wasn't what I meant at all." But he sort of went with it, and it turned into that track, which was kind of cool. That's one of the things about this band, is we don't ever try and stop the creative flow. If it's going a certain way, we just let it happen and see what happens. We also know each other well enough so that we can tell each other if something's going the wrong kind of direction and not be offended by it. Some kind of people you write with, you have to be treading on eggshells a little bit with how you go around things. Whereas Pete and I and Damien and I have worked together so long, we can take a track one direction, and then I could say to Pete, that sounds fucking awful, and he's like, yeah, you're right, and then we move on to something else. Equally, he could say to me, that piano part sounds like my 5-year-old daughter's playing it. In which case I won't take offence by that, and we'll move on and make it. It makes the writing very efficient. The process makes it very efficient.
So let me ask you this: what song underwent the greatest metamorphosis from how it was originally demoed or constructed to how we hear it on the album?
I would think maybe Secular Soul, the last track. We weren't really sure how it was going to move. Originally, that intro was at that kind of choir part was double speed, and then Pete said, "Oh, let's slow it down and basically halve the tempo of it." So that kind of made the next section kind of come out a little bit different. So I mean, all the tracks kind of do that really. We never come up with a chorus and think this is going to be the end chorus. It kind of starts at the beginning, and then we just see where it goes, you know.
Which, you know, seems like the most organic way to work, but I would assume that when you're coming back to the tracks, sometimes it could, being a musician as well, sometimes if you're being creative, sometimes you wonder, well, how did I do that? And how are we going to add to that and replicate?
It's more of a worry for us is how on earth we're going to play it live. You know, we did some shows about 2 or 3 years ago, which, you know, we kind of scheduled maybe 2 or 3 days of rehearsals together as a band, but we had, you know, maybe 5 or 6 rehearsals kind of at my studio, just kind of pre-production stuff. And the first day we kind of all went a little bit kind of white as a sheet, just kind of panicking, thinking we've kind of bitten off slightly more than we could chew here, because we played the whole album back to back on that particular run of shows. But when it comes to the recording, we don't kind of worry about how it's going to, you know, be, how we're going to manage to play it live. We just think about making the best record as we can, making it as kind of good as we can. And we have the kind of advantage in that because our schedules are so busy and we're going back and forward to track. We can spend a week on a track. Damien can have maybe a month to sort of start getting his melodies and things together on various tracks. We can come back, we demo the whole album first before we even start recording it. So by the time we do actually start recording again, re-recording all the parts, we've made the changes that we would otherwise have made. So by the time the album gets finished, we're a lot happier with it than maybe we would be if we took 3 months to record it in a studio.
Right, it gives you ears a rest, it gives you time to sit with it.
It does, yeah, and also the changes, you can make a change and then you can make a change back. You know, it's not like, you know, the confinement of being in a studio and going, right, we have this budget and we've got 2 months, it's got to be finished. And then the last week making changes and then maybe regretting those changes or regretting not making the changes. The way that we do it, which is kind of dictated to by our schedules with the other bands, is that, you know, we have time to live with the tunes and make those changes, which is great. It's great for us, not so great if people are waiting for the album for 4 years, but, you know, I'd rather make 3 albums in 10 years that we're really happy with and hopefully people will enjoy than knock out 8 albums, 3 of which are average.
Yeah. How would you define success with Headspace?
Well, certainly not financially, because, you know, we've had great support with InsideOut, and but, you know, we're not buying Ferraris and you know, big houses on the income from that, which is why we have to, you know, we're all professional musicians, so we have to kind of make our money from working with other established artists. But it's never been about that. It's about spending the time with the guys that, you know, that we all really like and making the music that we want to make. It's our creative outlet that, you know, we otherwise wouldn't have. Hi, this is Adam Wakeman. We'll be right back at the diner.
You went from, I guess, just working with Ozzy to working in the Sabbath confines. What's been the most surprising thing about Tony Iommi and working with him?
I think from when I started working with Sabbath back in 2004, I played mainly keyboards for them, only because the previous guy was the keyboard player, you know, and that's why I was kind of hired. I think I only played a bit of rhythm guitar in one tune, which is Paranoid, on that tour, the 2004-2005 period. And then when I went back to working with Ozzy, and we were playing, and Zakk Wylde had gone and Gus G had come into the band, when we played the Sabbath songs, I suggested that I play rhythm guitar because in those early songs there weren't any keyboard parts, and it's just a bit more authentic if there's a rhythm guitar there underneath Gus. So that's what I did for those shows. And then in about 2010, I think, we were on doing an Ozzy tour, and the Sabbath guys came along to the show at the Gibson Amphitheatre in Los Angeles, and Tony said, "Oh, I didn't realise you played more guitar." And he obviously thought about that, and then when we came out to do the last couple of the 13 tour, he said, would you be happier playing more rhythm guitar rather than keyboards on some of the tunes? And I said, I'm happy to play whatever, whatever's going to make it more authentic. Plus, you can't really say no to Tony Iommi, could you? No, Tony, to be honest, I'd rather just play Moog solos over the whole fucking lot. But he's brilliant. He's not, he will, I don't think he's told me to play something different since all the rehearsals and the shows. It's kind of, my understanding of the job is to play as close to him as possible riff-wise, so that when he solos, there's something underneath. It's kind of, it's not like Sabbath needs 2 guitar players. Do you know what I mean? Tony Iommi's sound and his parts are, they speak for themselves. But it is kind of in a live perspective, it is quite cool to have that guitar underneath rather than a keyboard. So that's how it's kind of changed, really, mostly over the years.
And any other artists that you're going to be working with in the future? Like, is there anybody else that after Sabbath winds down that you're going to be, like, what's the game plan?
Do you know, I don't think I've ever had a diary full until the end of the year before. In 23 years of being a professional musician, it's always been, it gets to January and you're like, shit, I've got no work. And then as the year starts, it starts to sort of come in.
Then you start to hustle and get your stuff out.
Exactly. I mean, the difference obviously with this is that they were planning the End tour for quite a while. So once we started rehearsals in December, we could see the schedule starting to unfold for the year. So although the dates hadn't all been released, we were told kind of the periods of time that the tour was going to happen. So there wasn't really a great deal of time to be able to plan other things, really. I mean, managing to squeeze a few Headspace shows in here and there in the summer, in between the gaps of the Sabbath stuff. But that's kind of why everything got finished in time for the Headspace thing, because I knew that this year was going to be a busy year and we just wouldn't be able to finish it. It would be another year later, So yeah, but it's great to have a diary full of work.
When it comes to your father, people who obviously did not know him, what is the one thing that you want people to know about your father? I mean,
you sound like he's died. Has he died? Have I missed
but I think that he's one of the most underrated musicians that there is, because he was so, in my opinion, he was so instrumental in Yes's sound, and people don't, in my opinion at least, they don't really acknowledge that as much as they should. So,
well, I think one of the things that's happened recently, obviously with the passing of David Bowie, is that my dad played on a lot of the early Bowie stuff, Life on Mars and Space Oddity, and a lot of people are coming up to me saying, I had no idea your dad played on those. Life on Mars for me is probably one of the best constructed songs of all time. I think it's chordally, if you sit down and play the chords, it just blows your mind as a kind of what's essentially a popular music song. He was an absolute genius, and my dad was very lucky, and he was doing a lot of sessions at the time, and to be on those kind of sessions is amazing. I think that's something that I think a lot of people don't realise, even though that he was obviously with Yes. Before that, he was doing 3 sessions a day for about 4 or 5 years. He played on so many tunes, loads of T-Rex songs and things that I didn't even know about. They sort of crop up, and occasionally I hear this piano part, and I'm like, sounds a bit like my dad. And I phone him up, and he's saying, "Yeah, I think I did that one. Yeah, you did that." That's just kind of. He's very humble, my dad. He doesn't kind of doesn't blow his own trumpet very often.
Listen, he's always he's moving forward. He's not living in the past. He's on to his.
That's right. He actually we did a show together. He did the 6 Wives of Henry VIII at Hampton Court Palace about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was playing second keys for him, and we had Ray Cooper, percussion player, on the 2 shows, and I said to Ray, he's probably the most recorded percussion player and drummer on sessions, because he's just been on everything since the sort of mid-50s. He was on absolutely every record, and he said to me, I think I've probably done about 400 sessions with your dad, and I was like, that's incredible. I said, what was the most memorable? And he said, I can't remember any of them. And I said, well, were you all like fucking out of the game? Was it just kind of crazy 60s and 70s? And he said, no. He said, there were just so many sessions. He said, they all blended into one. He said, after 5 or 6 years of doing 3 sessions a day, and you could do more if you want, He said, you don't remember, you know, half of them don't get released, and half of them the bands change, and you don't even know what's come out. He said, I don't remember any of them.
What was the first time you listened to Sabbath, and what'd you think about, you know, that?
Well, I played Iron Man in a band at school when I was about 15. I mean, I'd never have thought I was going to end up where I am now playing it. You know, it's still kind of a bit of a kind of childhood dream, really. You know, you look across the stage and see Tony Iommi and Geezer and Ozzy. It's kind of it's pretty. It's still, you know, gets the hair on the back of my neck up now. But you know, in a school band playing those sort of songs, but on keyboards, it was kind of, you're only in a band. When I was a kid, you're only in a band because at some point they had to play Van Halen's Jump, and you needed a fucking keyboard player. So if you didn't have a keyboard player, you couldn't play Jump, therefore you wouldn't get any gigs. So it was kind of, nobody really wanted a keyboard player, but I was lucky to be in that particular band, and we got to play Paranoid and Iron Man. So that was the kind of my early kind of, you know, introduction to it.
And what's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to you on tour?
On the Sabbath and Ozzy stuff, things are kind of fairly, you know, sedate now. You know, they're kind of they're the older gentlemen, should we say, the politest way to put it. So with them, it's been pretty cool. You know, there's not really been any kind of major kind of things. We've had a couple of you know, unusual plane moments, because we charter planes for the tours, which is fantastic. I remember turning up at the plane one morning, and the entire plane is in a pool of aviation fluid. And Ozzy had just been telling us all about the Randy Rhoads experience, and we turned up at this plane. He's like, I'm not fucking getting on that. So we went to this room, we sat down for kind of, you know, about half an hour, and one by one these different aviation experts came in. They just said, look, what's happened is they filled the plane up with fuel last night, and because of the temperature at night, it was cold, and it's hot now. The fuel has expanded, and it's come out of the end of the wings, which is the overspill for the fuel. And we were like, really? I don't know anything about planes. I'm like, that doesn't sound plausible at all. But we had all these people come in saying that this is what's happened. This is, you know, it's absolutely perfectly safe to fly. And that was the quietest plane ride ever. We all sat, and it was really turbulent as well, just to kind of, you know, we all sort of sat there. And Tommy Cleefetus is a particularly nervous flyer. And Ozzy went off to the bathroom and came back, and Tommy sat there. I'm pretty nervous, and we all sat there. And he just came back and just went, bang! Everybody just shit themselves. It was like, fuck's sake, you know. But that's not really a bad thing that's happened. That's just one amusing thing that's happened that just sprung to mind.
Sounds like something that was like an Almost Famous 2 or something
Exactly.
like that, you know.
There's been many a moment where I've sat in the back of the plane just going, oh my God, this is just like that film. Well, apart from, you know, I'm not homosexual, but that's the bit you're referring to.
Right, yep, that whole thing. Great, thank you so much, Adam.
No worries at all. Hi, I'm Adam Wakeman from Headspace. You're watching Artisan News.